Hey guys, I've gone ahead and put together this intro video to a program I've designed so you can get your first strict ring muscle up. Before we start, I should preface this video by saying that this program is not for those who are looking to get their first kipping ring muscle up or who do not meet a couple obvious prerequisites. Because a strict ring muscle up is more challenging than one strict chest to bar pull up and one strict full range of motion ring dip, you're going to need at least 2 solid reps of each. Having more than 2 only helps. As a point of reference, some individuals can have 5 or more strict chest to bar pull-ups and still not have one strict ring muscle up. A further must-have is a false grip. You'll need to be able to hold a false grip with both bent and straight arms for 5 seconds at the least. So if you got that under your belt, you're good to go. This program is going to focus on strength through the transition of the muscle up, the stubborn part at the top of the pull that requires uncanny strength so that you can ultimately dip out of your muscle up. First, let's define what the transition is. Let's say that the start of the transition is the moment of peak arm flexion while hanging, and the end of the transition is the moment of peak shoulder extension while at the bottom of the dip. Kipping eliminates the transition point and makes the function of a ring muscle up, which is getting the top of an unstable object, easier and more efficient. Unfortunately, that means if one strictly trains kipping, pun intended, then key musculature will go untrained, which translates to that athlete experiencing a loss of function and performance. So let's talk about those key muscles important for strict ring muscle up transitions. There are 2 important muscle actions happening during the transition and a key position reached at the end. During the transition, a strict ring muscle up requires significant scapular retraction and shoulder extension. Once an athlete reaches the end of the transition, they end up needing excellent mobility and strength in the bottom of the dip. This program will focus on strengthening the rhomboid major and minor and the middle fibers of the traps. These muscles work to bring the shoulder blades together. This is called adduction. This program will also focus on strengthening the posterior fibers of the deltoid, also called the rear delt, and the teres major. The rear delt extends the shoulder, and the teres major is responsible for internal rotation, adduction, and retroversion, which is bringing the arm behind our body. During the muscle up, this means getting our elbow from pointing down while hanging to pointing up before dipping. Finally, this program will build mobility through the anterior deltoid and pectoralis major. This is necessary so we can dip deeply and also have enough strength to press out. Now that we know what muscles to focus on, let's see them at work. One of the best ways to learn is to learn from the best. Let's watch Lee Turner set the world record for strict muscle ups and see what techniques he uses that we can glean and observe the strength necessary to perform our muscle up. Let's note at the beginning, Lee can skip a few things we can't if we're going to go for our first muscle up. His surplus of strength compared to the strength required to perform just one allows him to transition quickly and not struggle through the sticky part. The most beneficial part for us to watch, in that case, will be his muscle ups at the end when he gets tired and fails. The difficulty he experiences here will be most applicable for a beginner like us getting our first. As he starts, check out the first important technique he uses. Notice how far his toes are in front of him, 3 feet or so. This causes Lee to adopt a lean back position. Suddenly, the strict muscle up goes from what some may say is a vertical pull into like a hybrid. That is not purely vertical nor horizontal. In fact, a good test of whether or not you are strong enough puller for a strict ring muscle up without ever touching a pair of rings is the arch chest to bar pull up. See if you can do one. It looks like this. Returning to the video, we see how important it is to be comfortable at the bottom of a deep dip. At the top of the rings, he makes it a point to flash the rings every single time, displaying excellent strength and stability in the externally rotated shoulder pack position. The more tired he gets, the further he leans back. He does this to engage primary movers like the lats, so he can take advantage of a hard and fast pull to propel him through the transition with the aid of momentum. An interesting observation here. For Lee, his pecs were his ultimate undoing. You'll see the ring start to drift apart. For Lee, that's what keeps him from completing more strict muscle-ups. This will likely not be an issue for us, but if it is, it's your pecs that need work. Let's take a final look at Lee's world record-setting 13th strict ring muscle-up, especially the transition. And remember that our first one will look a lot like his last. Moving on and knowing what we know about what muscle is responsible for the muscle-up transition, and also just observing the techniques Lee used to turn the strict muscle-up into a hybrid pull, this brings us to a big question. What is the best type of pull to train for a strict muscle-up? Would it be in your best interest that I prescribe vertical pulling exercises like pull-ups, pegboards, and rope climbs? Or what about horizontal pulling exercises like bent over rows, ring rows, and cable rows? Luckily for us, research has already answered this question. Lehman et al. Tested how specific muscles react to certain exercises. He tested 4. In CrossFit, the movement equivalents he tested would be wide grip pull-ups, chin-ups, knuckles to armpit ring rows, or ring rows to about 90 degrees of arm flexion. He selected 12 college males with 6 or more months of weight training experience. Here are the untranslated results for my science nerds. Basically, the seated row with scapular retraction is supreme among the 4 to cause the most amount of contraction with the key muscles we mentioned before. Said another way, the best way to train the transition muscles in the upper back for strict muscle-ups is not with vertical pulling exercises, but horizontal. Therefore, this program is based on horizontal pulling exercises, not vertical, which aren't bad per se, but don't represent the highest bang for the buck if we can already perform 2 strict chest-to-bar pull-ups, and our goal is to build on that pre-existing vertical strength to get a strict ring muscle-up. We're going to use the following movements to strengthen our muscle-up: horizontal false grip ring rows, Australian pull-ups, Russian dip negatives, banded pull-aparts, banded rings muscle-ups from seated with a lean back, bottom of dip holds, dip supports, and ring row holds. Each possesses a unique, invaluable, and irreplaceable stimulus to help us in our journey to get the strict ring muscle-up. First, let's talk about the horizontal false grip ring row. The focus of this exercise is to pull deep with the false grip and strengthen the transition muscles that will take us from chest-to-bar pull-ups to strict muscle-ups. We'll sit up with our feet elevated in order to use as much of our body weight as possible, but also make ourselves distinctly horizontal. If you can rep out over 5 reps at body weight, with control touching your knuckles to your ribs while flashing the rings, you should add a vest and arcs plus this movement. If not, to scale, remove the box first, and to make it even easier, continually walk your feet back until you can maintain a solid false grip and your knuckles can make contact with your ribs or deeper. A few things not to do. Avoid pulling with a broken midline. Instead, squeeze your butt really tight and keep in one line. Think about leading with your hips high and static. Also, avoid shallow pulling. Aim for your knuckles to reach your ribs with every rep. No rep yourself unless contact is made. Finally, avoid separated feet and bent legs. Squeeze your legs together, squeeze your quads, point your toes, and create a rigid core as to not lose any force created by pulling, and also reinforce good gymnastics form. For this exercise and the remaining, we'll discuss how many reps you should do of them, and other details will be provided in an Excel sheet down below. This is just the overview. The next movement removes the instability of the rings, allowing us to focus on pulling in a specific manner as to target particular muscles and pulling styles. With Australian pull-ups, we're going to practice pulling in 3 distinct fashions. The first will be pulling in the deepest applicable manner with regards to shoulder extension. This helps us adopt the lean back position while performing strict muscle-ups. It will take the form of a navel to bar. The second pull will be our sternum to bar, most likely to mimic the depth of a strict muscle-up. And the final pull will be pulling with the most emphasis on the arms, and this will take the form of a collarbone to bar. This style simply strengthens our arms, nothing fancy there. To scale the Australian pull-up, first take the box away. Then raise the bar so you can be more upright, just like with the standard ring row. Make sure you scale so you can always make contact with the bar. A few things to avoid. Make sure not to pull with a broken midline, just like before. Lead with the hips. Avoid pulling with your hands too narrow or too wide. Instead, pick a distance apart that best represents the rings. Also, keep the legs straight and together. Do not let them drift apart or let your knees break. The third movement we have is Russian dip negatives performed on a box. The rep starts by jumping on the top of the box and reaching support. From here, we're going to lower ourselves to the deepest dip we can achieve and hold it. Then, we're going to lower ourselves to our elbows as slow as we can manage. Once on our elbows, we will rise to an elbow support. Finally, we will extend at the shoulder, effectively leaning back until our arms are straight. That's 1. The Russian dip negative will significantly improve your shoulder extension strength, bottom of dip mobility, and even train some of our pulling muscles. To scale, use the band. Make sure you bend your legs over the band so the band doesn't fly out from in front of you. Fourth, we're going to do banded pull-aparts. I'm going to grab the band with my hands facing up, thumbs out. With straight arms, I want to maximally contract my upper back and pull my shoulders down. This causes my hands to go behind me, my chest to open up, and my rib cage to extend. You can find a lot of specifics regarding this movement online, and a lot of its scientific details are far outside my pay grade. Specifically, we will not use this exercise as a developer of scapulohumeral rhythm as some PTs will prescribe them for, but rather as a way to develop in-range scapular retraction. Fifth, we're going to do banded rings muscle-ups. In my opinion, this is the most like an actual strict ring muscle-up, far more so than the infamous and often prescribed muscle-up transition drill. To set up, we loop a band around a ring, and then the band around a bar. Both the tension of the band and the height of the bar are factors in making the muscle-up harder, as I will show. Make sure to pick a height in a band that allows you to properly flash the dips at the end. Before starting the rep, sit on the bumper plate. This will give you a boost so you can have your arms fully extended by your side. Begin the rep with your arms straight, rings flashed out. Then, turn them in and begin your pull. Pull as deeply as you can with a false grip. We will add a lean back in order to increase tension on the band and train the upper back using dynamic resistance, which means making the movement harder by stretching the band. This is awesome because it will program our muscles to fire harder through the hardest part, which we know is the transition. By leaning back, we will force ourselves to sit up. Strict muscle-ups require a good amount of strength in this regard when turning over, so let's practice this with intention and sit up as quickly as possible into the deepest ring dip we can afford. This looks a lot like the muscle-up transition drill as I mentioned before, but better. Finally, we will press out and flash the rings. On the way back up, spend a little extra time at the transition negative to get some more time under tension. While leaning back, make sure you maintain the depth of your pull. Sitting up, we sit up quick, nice and deep, and we press all the way out at the top. Take the eccentric slow through the transition. The sixth exercise we'll do is the bottom of the dip hold. Before doing them, see if you can find a super friend as amazing as my partner in crime here to help you with some stretching. I doubt you'll find one. Have your buddy pull your elbows together with your hands on your hips. See if they can stick around for the bottom of the dip holds too. But if not, you can try using a band. To set up for this exercise, adjust the rings so they're at the height of your armpit. Make sure they're even too. To use band assistance, double a green band and thread your arms through. The seventh exercise is dip supports. Set the rings up to avoid jumping into support. The rings are already shaky enough. Make it so you only need to lean into it. Once your arms are in the proper position and the rings are turned outward but pinned to your side, lift the legs as appropriate. Achieve a hollow body position with your toes out in front. Dip supports are going to teach us to reach stability with our shoulders externally rotated. During the transition, these same muscles are called on to help us get into a dip. It is a near perfect correlation. I've personally found that those who cannot support themselves with the rings turned out lack the last ounce of strength to turn over on the rings, so we'll make it a point to build that strength. The eighth and final exercise is the icing on the cake. We're going to take ourselves to what we know of the hardest part of the strict muscle up and get some isometric time under tension in that exact place. This exercise is deceptively difficult. We're going to perform a ring row hold, but pulling as deeply as we can. That's it. However, our focus is on contracting our muscles as hard as possible while in this ideal position. So we need to make sure we don't make it too hard on ourselves such that the rings are far out in front of us and we can't have our knuckles on our ribs. Believe me, you will not need to lean back very far for this. I hope you enjoyed this intro video. That's all I have. Feel free to ask me any and every question you have around the gym. For the specifics on how many reps to perform, in what order, how often, download the Excel sheet below.